Follow me as I follow him. If I'm not following him, then you better find a quick exit. Say amen. Amen. Turn to your neighbor and tell him, this is your season. Oh, my goodness. Now, if I'd have been one of those neighbors you was turning to, I'll say, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. You didn't believe what you just said. Let me just set an example. I'm going to kind of look out in the congregation, maybe look into the camera. This is your season. Come on. This is your season, man. Come on, give Abba a praise offering. I received that myself. This is one of the most powerful seasons that is on our Messianic Hebrew calendar. It should be on the Christian calendar. Shame on us for not understanding that. I know we always talk about wanting the truth and looking for the truth, and there's a lot of individuals out there that are calling themselves prophets. And if you call yourself a prophet and if you haven't pointed people back to the Torah and the fundamental examples inside the Torah, then you are a P-R-O-F-I-T rather than a prophet. Say amen. The reason I want to share this with you this afternoon is because I believe that there's something, I don't know if you can feel or sense the electricity that's in the air. Something is about to happen. We're in the midst of the season between Passover and Shavuot or Pentecost, and it's called the Counting of the Omer. And it's, in my opinion, it's one of those overlooked, mundane, relegated as an afterthought rituals. It actually highlights the interval between the spring festivals, as I said, and most people kind of just acknowledge it as the counting up towards Shavuot or the counting of the Omer. And it's interesting, but most people fail to ask, why are there these other holy convocations? Why isn't there some sort of a numerical counting? Why isn't there a counting between these other holy convocations, specifically allocated to them like this one? It leads me to believe that because Abba's associated a 50-day season counting upwards or towards the festival of Shavuot, that there's something unique, something set apart about this holy convocation that makes it different from all the other holy convocations, simply because it needs 50 days to create a spiritual atmosphere that's necessary to enable you to truly celebrate Shavuot. Most of us understand Pentecost, Shavuot. The Christian community understands the significance, the importance, the power of Shavuot. But we forget that Father's giving us this spiritual interlude between Passover and Pentecost or Shavuot to get us jacked up, if you will, pumped up, excited, get us ready. Something's about to happen. Most of the arguments that you find regarding this counting of the Omer involve the specific count and when it commences. In other words, does it begin the Sabbath after the weekly Sabbath? Do you begin to count after the high Shabbat, which would be the day after Passover celebrated, beginning the Feast of Unleavened Bread? I'm going to share with you my opinion, and I believe that I can give you a good fundamental reason for sharing my opinion. But I'm also going to share with you why I believe the vast majority of people don't have the same opinion that I do. And the reason for that is that I believe it's simply to hide the resurrection of our King and to obfuscate it, to deny it, to put it inside a fog so that you can't really understand the significance of all of these other quote-unquote festivals inside the Feast of Passover, Unleavened Bread, Yom HaBikurim, which is the early first fruits that occurred 3 days after, 72 hours, the sign of Jonah, after the execution of our Messiah. Are you hearing me? So let's look at this counting of the Omer. If you understand what most people say about it, the fundamental explanation regarding this count is simply because it's connected to two different aspects of the spring harvest, the agricultural season that you find associated with the barley crop. Shepherd John alluded to that earlier. And then the harvest of the crop of wheat that you find associated with Shavuot. And so this 49-day interval in between, it seems as if that's just simply the purpose of it. It's giving you the time to count down between the barley crop and the wheat crop. But I submit to you that there's some profound spiritual reasons, and I'm hoping that as we look at it, I can reveal some of these things to you, and you'll be able to see what Abba has in store for you. And so let's look at this Sephirot HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. The word Sephirot comes from the root of the word Sephar, and we actually get another word, Sephar, which relegates us or helps us to understand it. It has a connection, if you will, to a book, something that's ensconced in a book that's been written down as a record. And then if you go back and look at it, it tells something about counting, or relating, or rehearsing, to speak or to utter words. And the first time that you see this root word Sephar actually used is in Genesis chapter 15, verse 5. And when you're studying, it's always good to remember what we refer to as the law of first reference. Because the first time you see a word used, it kind of begins to set a precedent for how that word should be used in the future. And so the first time you see it is back in Genesis chapter 15, verse 5, and this is speaking about Abraham and an encounter that he had with Abba. And it says, and he, Yahweh, brought him, Abraham, forth abroad, and he said, look now towards Shemayim, heaven, and tell Shafar. This is the word that we have, that, again, it's the root of Sephirot, the counting. And so you need to understand what's being shared with you. And he says, Sephar the stars. In other words, he's not talking about going up there and counting each of the individual stars, because Abraham would never have been able to accomplish that task. What he's actually telling him is to read the message that's written in the stellar luminaries. There is a book, there is a Sefer, there's a book that has everything that I have written regarding the redemption plan of my kingdom, and what I have promised you regarding who you are and what I am going to entrust with you. And if you can understand that, Abraham, if you can read and comprehend that, it then goes on to say, so shall your seed be. In other words, what's written there is going to be lived out in the life of your children and your children's children. That's interesting, because it's actually inferring that something here in Genesis chapter 15, verse 5, sets in motion how this word should be interpreted, and then it kind of relates that message of the counting of the stars, reading what's written in the stellar heavens, with this counting that we're doing right now between Passover and Shavuot. There should be a message written in the stellar luminaries. Remember, there's a witness in the heavens and a witness in the earth, which is the written Torah. Those two witnesses should say the very same thing. And what we should be doing right now is reading the message that was written in the stellar luminaries, because it's talking about Abraham's seed. That was the promise in Genesis 15:5. It wasn't so much about Isaac and Jacob at that particular generation that was being born, as it is the seed of Abraham that is walking the earth right now. I challenge you to take a look into the stellar luminaries and see what has been written about you. Another interesting aspect of this word Sephar is that we get our English word cipher. Cipher means to encode something, to hide it inside some kind of a code that keeps the average individual from being able to understand the message. And so I challenge you again this afternoon, can you decipher the message of the counting of the Omer? Because if you can decipher this message that Abba's trying to reveal to you right now in this season, the message is to enable you to see the manifest presence of the King at the coming of his presence manifested here on the earth during Shavuot. But it's also to enable you to become the individual that was typed and written in the stellar luminaries. Whatever was written right there about the seed of Abraham, you're to be transformed into that seed. And this counting of the Omer, this season's allowing you a season of preparation and transformation, so that when you appear at Shavuot, you will not be an old sinner saved by grace. You will be a living, walking, viable man that's capable of demonstrating the inheritance that Abba has given you and tasked you with, and you will become a force that must be accounted for in the earth. Say amen. Let's look at the word Omer. It's translated as sheaf in the King James English, and it is a sheaf, a heap, as in a dry measure, something that's gathered together. But it also indicates to manipulate or to deal with someone that you have control or power over, like you would mistreat a slave, to make merchandise of someone, to treat them as if you owned them. Now, I want you to understand, Passover is about getting out of Egypt. Passover helps you to understand that you've been in bondage. All of your generations have been in bondage for such a long period of time that when you look in the mirror, all you can do is see an individual who has been a slave. You don't know how to live as a free man. The counting of the Omer is about giving you an opportunity to change habits and mindsets so that when you are presented before the king at the coming encounter called Shabbat, you will no longer be a slave. You will understand who you belong to and who you are. Is it possible that this season, counting of the Omer, actually involves a disciplined effort? Listen to me. This is more than just idly going out on a daily basis and putting a number on a block of somewhere and say, today's number 1, today's number 2. This is actually giving you an opportunity to begin to construct a disciplined, concerted effort to understand a recorded message that has been set in the heavens regarding who you are and what you're supposed to be doing right now. Is it possible that what I was doing as I'm sharing this message with you is that he's beginning to pull back the curtains, and you're going to be able to finally see the truth of this season as it was originally intended? This season is a rehearsal that exposes an ancient ledger, an ancient record of accounts, an ancient book that has an encoded message. The encoded message involves the DNA of the Creator that was embedded, encoded, encrypted, if you will, in those stellar luminaries. And that DNA represents the quote-unquote lost sheep of the house of Israel, the scattered seed of Abraham that really doesn't understand who they are. But as you begin to see this curtain pull back and you understand the purpose of this season, you understand where you're headed, your destiny, your objective, you realize that you've been sort of like the salmon here in the Pacific Northwest. You may not understand why, but there is an innate drawing inside of you, a primordial beginning, something from eternity past that's drawing you towards a destination where you were first birthed or born, and it's an original place of begetting, and that begetting is going to occur at Shavuot, the mountain of encounter in the days in front of us. You're being drawn to that. You may not understand. You may not have a good reason why. You just know something on the inside of you is driving you towards this begetting where someone is going to have an encounter with the eternal husband. And when that encounter takes place, there's going to be a changing in the natural realm that has already manifested itself in the realm of the Spirit. This has been written from eternity's past, and it's about to be fulfilled in the natural. There is a warning message being served to the powers that be. In the days in front of us, Abba's going to rise up amongst his people. And just as it was when the children of Israel were about to move from one location to the next, you're going to hear inside your spirit man, you're going to hear a voice like Moshe used to say before the children of Israel, speaking to Yahweh when the Ark of the Covenant would be lifted up. Arise, O Yah, and let your enemies be scattered. And I'm telling you that the enemies are about to be dealt with. Say amen. It's not an accident that this word, look at it with me, Omer. It's etymologically related to the Hebrew word amar, to speak. It's interesting because when you speak, you're actually taking a shroud a cover off of something. You're unveiling it. You're removing the darkness. You're exposing it. You're shining light on it. The act of speaking, releasing, indicates that you're shining light on whatever that subject is that you're dealing with. And so connecting Omer to Amar hints that there's also a connection linking Passover and Shavuot all the way back to the first instance that you see the word Amar being used. Amar was first seen in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3. This is powerful. And you can also see in Genesis chapter 2 and chapter 3, the first 3 chapters of the creation encounter, you see the same root letters of Omer, Amar, and look at this next one. This is just mind-staggering. Strong's number 6191, the word aram, meaning to be naked. Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 2 were described with these same letters that you find attributed to this season that we're talking about now, the counting of the Omer. They were considered naked and not ashamed. They were literally being described in the condition that Yahweh created the man and the woman to be in Genesis chapter 1 forward, when he said for man to be able to reproduce and to replenish, to subdue and have dominion, be fruitful and multiply. They were created to have the ability to speak things into existence. That's how they were intended to procreate, not through the natural flesh that we see today. You were actually intended to speak your children into existence. And you think, when you hear that, it becomes so far from our natural understanding that you forget your children are going to grow up and become exactly what you have been speaking over them. Say amen. Does the Omer count actually hint at a restoration of the Edenic ability to procreate and the mandate for you to be fruitful, multiply, and replenish and have dominion at the end of the counting of the Omer? Think about that. Do you need something to give you some more proof? If you go back and look at the counting of the Omer, it actually is pointing us not only backwards to creation, but it's pointing us forward to where there's going to be another future demonstration of what Abba had planned in Genesis chapter 1 when he created man and woman and set them in chapter 2 in the garden. Now let me share something with you. You can see the evidence of every one of the holy convocations, not just the one we're talking about. You can see the evidence of every one of them in the creation account. I'm going to show you Shavuot in Eden. Now, the rabbis teach that every mitzvot, as it pertains to one of the holy convocations, whether it's Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, Yom HaBikurim, Shavuot, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, or Sukkot, every one of those convocations are incremental in being used as a tikkun. In other words, as you rehearse those, understanding why you're rehearsing them, that you're actually helping to repair the world and restore the world back to its original created Edenic condition. And to further support that, the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai that occurred at Shavuot actually relates to the tree of life, which Adam, now Israel at Sinai, has been cut off from. Since Israel was expelled out of Eden, Adam was expelled out of Eden, and you can look at it back at Mount Sinai, you can see that so was Israel as a nation, because the promised land was also to be a return to Eden. Are you hearing me? Adam and Eve were expelled out of the garden. Why? Because they touched. Brittany mentioned this. She touched on this last week. She mentioned about touching the serpent. That word for touch there is nega. And it indicates something involving becoming leprous because of the act of reaching out and touching something that was prohibited and unclean. And because of that, Adam and Hava, and now at Mount Sinai, Israel, they became leprous. It caused them to be brought under bondage, and they have been unclean from that time until this day. Because of that expulsion, Adam and Eve lost the ability to procreate via the spoken word, and so mankind had to indulge the flesh. Now listen to me. Indulging the flesh instead of being able to procreate by the truth of Yahweh's word, now man procreates with lashon hara, an evil tongue, a lying tongue. And it's not an accident that the rabbis say that leprosy is directly a result of lashon hara, an evil tongue. Can y'all see that? So because of what happened to Adam and Eve all the way back there in Genesis chapter 3 and the children of Israel at Mount Sinai, all of the offspring has been doomed to an existence as a leprous colony that has to be quarantined from the presence of Yahweh until you no longer manifest a body of death. Now you know why Paul said in Romans chapter 7, "Oh, wretched man that I am! Who will deliver me from this body of death?" You know what he was talking about? He was talking about a war in his members, his flesh wanting to do one thing and his mind another. And that's why in Romans chapter 12 we are admonished, don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed. How? By the renewing of my mind, so that I can demonstrate the good, acceptable, and perfect will of Yahweh. Well, when you begin to share those things, the first thing out of most people's mouth as a form of argument is that I thought Passover delivered me. Passover delivers the body out of Egypt. Oh, I don't know if I believe that. What are you talking about? Go back and look at what happened to the children of Israel. For 40 years, they wandered around in a wilderness situation because they still had Egypt in them. And it was only an 11-day journey from where they were in Egypt to the promised land. So Passover, the purpose of Passover is to get the man out of Egypt. The purpose of the 50-day interval between Passover and Shavuot is to get Egypt out of the man. Let me share this with you. The battle is right here. And if you don't understand how important it is to get your mind controlled and learn how to subject your mind to the Word of Yah, your mind will determine how long you stay out of Egypt. That's exactly right. And it's interesting because there's a lesser-known name of Shavuot that's found in both the Mishnah and the Talmud, and it's called Atzeret. We talk about the last day of Sukkot, Shemini Atzeret, but Shavuot is also called Atzeret. And you think, well, what does that have to do with what you're teaching? Well, the same root letters in Atzeret contain the root of the word Zararot, which indicates leprosy. Again, that directly is related to Lashon Hara, an evil tongue. An evil tongue is a tongue that releases word or seed, or, listen to me carefully, you can either release or you can receive words that are not living. And so the counting of the Omer pictures Adam, listen to me, here's your Shavuot connection. The counting of the Omer pictures Adam tilling the ground from whence he was taken until such time as a bride can return and have a ketubah, the gathered words. That's what an omer is, a sheaf. It's gathered grain, it's gathered seed, it's gathered words, it's a gathered message etched in the stellar heavens. Adam will always have to till the ground until such time as the outcasts are going to be gathered together and presented before the King of all creation as the bride, as Shepherd John said earlier, without spot or wrinkle. I don't know if I understand it. How long is the interval? How long is the interval between Passover and Shavuot? It's 50 days. Isn't it interesting that Adam's exile is said to last 120 Jubilee seasons, Jubilee being 50 years. 120 times 50, 6,000 years. A day is as 1,000 years. 50 days till Shavuot's Jubilee. 100 in Jubilee seasons of 50 years until the final Shavuot season. The Omer count begins the tilling of the ground that Adam was spoken to about. I don't know if I understand it. Go back and look at it. It's in the Scripture. I'm not just isolating these things to try and prove a point. The Hebrew word for till is the word avad, and it means to serve, till, and worship, but it has a numeric value of 76, which just so happens to be the same value as the phrase alumah, which is a bound sheaf. The root of that word alumah is alam, which means to be silent. Remember Isaiah 53:7, which it says, our Messiah was silent before the shearers. Yeshua had a bound tongue. His tongue was a bound sheaf. It was a bound sheaf of words filled with a message for the outcasts of Israel. And that message would be raised up and presented before the King of creation when he exited out of the ground and waved that first fruits offering, the barley offering, before the throne of the Creator. He counted the Omer before the foundation of the world. And if your ears tuned properly, when you heard me talking about alam, alumah, you probably heard the word alma. And when I was putting this together, I was reminded of Isaiah 7, verse 14. Behold, a virgin, an alma. They're etymologically related. Aleph, lamed, mem, hey, ayin, lamed, mem, hey. A virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Listen to this. When you look at the Hebrew word virgin, it's normally suggested as with a different etymology. I believe that it actually indicates the word alma from the root alam, something that's concealed and hidden. How can I say that? Because inside the woman's womb was a concealed spot. It was the fountain that contained the seed of all creation. It had an omer, a sheaf inside of it. It was concealed until the time it was to be set free, born again. If what I'm sharing with you is the truth, then the root of that word alam indicates a betrothed couple. And that betrothed couple, if you go back and look at the ancient Near Eastern way that the whole mindset of the marriage is treated, a betrothed couple is actually referred to as concealed ones. And so during the betrothal, the fiancés lived in their parents' home, separated, secluded, and forbidden from seeing one another. Listen to me. We're living in the Father's house, but we are secluded from our groom until such time, listen to me carefully, as we can be presented to him without spot or wrinkle. We are at present the concealed or the veiled one. The counting of the Omer pulls back that veil as the bride begins to prepare herself for her husband at Shavuot. Listen to me. What I'm about to share with you is mind-staggering. Yeshua, as I said, is the first original bound sheaf. But the virgin bride is to be the twin to that bound sheaf. Go back and look at Genesis chapter 2 when Yahweh said he was going to create Adam and he could not find an help meet for him. And edzer kenegdo. Go back and look at that phrase, edzer kenegdo. It indicates one who stands in front of the other and is literally a mirror image of him. She became the twin to the Adam. They became basar echad, one flesh, and they were charged with producing living sons. That's amazing to me. And if you consider that, it seems to me then that the counting of the Omer as a rehearsal reaches all the way back to creation to an original Shavuot. And the purpose of that is to remind us you have a future harvest or ingathering, a future Shavuot that you should be expecting to occur in the not too distant future. This group of outcasts that are being gathered, we are being omered, amard. We're being bound together. Listen to me, that word amar means seated. We are receiving the words of Yahweh and we're being brought to the light. We're being unveiled to the world by the word of Elohim. And listen to me carefully. If you look at the word Omer, it indicates a a group of grain, a sheaf, if you will, of the same genetically type plants that have been marked and harvested. If you were to look at them, it would be no different than me talking to you about a group of trees, and I could tell you that is a stand of trees over there. Are you listening? So Omer is connected to standing. Those that find themselves at Shavuot will only be there because we have been Omered. We have had our standing corrected. And we have our standing corrected simply because we have read the words that have been written in the creation heavens, and we understand we are living men and living women. We are not in bondage to Pharaoh, and we were never intended to be in bondage. Say amen. We have been transformed so that the last Adam would have a last Isha. The last Adam and the last Isha will be in the same capacity that they were in Genesis chapter 2. We will be naked and not ashamed before our husband, knowing full well that our potential for being fruitful and multiplying, replenishing, subduing, and having dominion over the kingdom of Elohim is right here now on the earth. Shavuot corrects your Omer. Shavuot corrects your standing from the barley harvest to the wheat. As Shepherd John said earlier, from the animal nature to that of a man. This ought to be exciting to you. The counting of the Omer is meant to stir the anticipation of those who have been redeemed through Passover and are now undergoing a series of 7 days of ritual purification. 7 days, 7 times 7, 49 days. The 50th day you're presented, listen to me, is connecting you to a literal Yovel or Jubilee. And it's reminiscent of part of a wedding preparation called an erusin, where you would have 7 days of preparation before the bride was presented to her husband. Shavuot is a 7 times 7 days. When you see 7 times 7, it's called, and I know this would be hard for you to grasp, it's called a sevening. When one would seven themselves, you are literally declaring, I am entering into a covenant. And we don't understand covenant cutting, not in the Western world. If you go outside the Western world, most people inside the Asiatic and African continents, they understand that covenant cutting is a blood covenant, and it involves the death of those that enter into the covenant if they fail to be obedient to it. That ought to bless you. Let me share with you Leviticus chapter 23, verse 15. And you shall count unto you from the morrow after the Shabbat, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, here, listen to this, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Look at this word complete. This blew my mind. It's the Hebrew word tamim. It means to complete, be complete without blemish or spot, remember? Yeshua presents his bride to himself without blemish or spot. Mankind in general and Israel in particular has been an adulterous bride. From Genesis 3 forward, the bride has been unclean. And just like Brittany was sharing the other day, the cleansing of the leper and the ritual for the priests are all very similar. Israel presented herself at Mount Sinai on the 3rd day, just like a leper is commanded to present himself, so that you can see if there's still spots in you, and you could be judged by the priest whether you were clean or unclean. But because of Israel's unclean, impure condition, she could not touch her husband until she had entered into a ritual mikvah and was declared clean. Go back and look at the Mount Sinai encounter. Moshe told the children of Israel at the instructions of Yahweh, cordon off the bottom of the mountain. Tell them, don't come and touch this mountain lest they die. They need to spend 3 days washing themselves and getting clean. How apropos that on the 3rd day of creation, the first time you see something regarding a mikvah is here regarding the gathering of the waters, and the gathering of the waters on the third day, back in Genesis 1 verse 9, is right before the releasing of seed after its kind into the earth. Isn't that powerful? Well, then what happened on the fourth day? Listen to this. This, again, is mind-staggering. What happens on the fourth day? You have the sun created. The sun is a shadow picture of the Messiah. Well, who is created after him? You had a lesser light we refer to as the moon. The moon has no light of its own. It can only reflect. So the moon becomes a twin. Are you listening to me? The moon becomes the Tamim Teomim, the perfect twin. And not only that, there are other lesser lights created, and those lesser lights are set into the heavens, and the purpose of the lesser lights being set in the heavens is to serve as an eternal ketubah, a wedding contract that's recorded. Listen, this is mind-staggering. Yahweh knows who you were before you were born into your mother's womb. And so the stellar heavens carry all the information about Abraham's seed. That means your name has been written in the stellar luminaries long before we ever arrive to this particular season in our destiny. The lineage of the sons of man have been recorded in the heavens in those stellar luminaries long before mankind was ever thought about. And so this Omer count begins to expose all of the ancestral DNA that has been hidden for millennia in the heavens, and it's preparing you and I. This ought to get you excited, because it's preparing you and I to be examined, if you will, by the high priest when we get to Mount Sinai, to see if, in fact, you have the pure blood, the pure DNA of the creator of the universe, so that you have no blemish, no spot, you have no leprosy moving in your life. At the end of this third day mikvah, back in Exodus chapter 19, let me read this to you. I had really never paid any attention. I'd read 1,000,000 times that they were supposed to come to the mountain. You couldn't get any closer because the mountain's cordoned off. And you're supposed to change your garments, wash yourself, and then approach it at the third day. But I had never paid any attention to verse 13. There shall not a hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. Listen to this. When the Yovel sounds, hallelujah, there's a Yovel about to take place. When the Yovel sounds, it says that they'll be able to come up to the mountain. You know what that's telling you? The mountain was the manifest presence of the Son of the Most High, the groom that was intended to embrace his bride at Mount Sinai. And when that Yovel sounds, you are entitled to step up to the mountain and grab your man. Woo! Some of y'all, it's been a while since you've been grabbed. You probably forgot what it feels like. But I'm telling you, there's an exhilarating experience about to transpire in this earth. The enemy thinks that he has the market cornered on the charisma that's necessary to demonstrate power in the earth. They don't have enough power to blow the fuzz off a peach compared to what the majesty that's going to be demonstrated in the sons of the Most High in the days ahead of us. Look at that word teomim. It has a numeric value of 490. Just happens to be the same number of years that Israel was sent into exile for not observing the Shabbat. The Shabbat is also a purification period, 7 days where the menstrual blood or an unclean condition of any sort, leprosy, keeps the bride from her husband until she immerses herself in living waters. The living waters representing his word. It's the same ritual for leprosy. And it's not an accident that Daniel speaks of a future 490-year period where this exile is ended. And I also was reminded of Hosea chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. Come and let us return to Yahweh, for he hath torn and he will heal us. He hath smitten and he will bind us. After 2 days he will revive us, and in the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. What third day do you think he's talking about? Yeshua came in the fourth day. 3 days later, the third day makes it the seventh day. 7 times 70, 49. Should we be expecting a Yovel or a Jubilee soon? What is a Yovel? All who have been in bondage are released. Some of y'all don't understand what it's like to be in bondage. All your debts are canceled. All the inheritances, though formerly lost, stolen, or sold, have to be restored. This is not something that Shepherd John just happened to stumble across, and he's been working on some nice paperwork and bring. This is an eternal edict that has been issued from the word of Elohim, and the powers that be know more about your inheritance and how to control your inheritance than you do. The fields are left fallow during the Yovel. Why? Because El Shaddai has to become your source. So that tells me that the counting of the Omer is pointing towards a Shavuot Yovel, and it's a season of freedom, not liberty, freedom. Liberty implies that my freedom is determined by and sanctioned by or controlled by the state. Freedom is the right of the living man, and Shavuot restores my Omer, my standing. It affects how I'm presented before the king. Most of us, when we start thinking about this counting of the Omer, we think about the 50-day count, and many of us depend on our Jewish brothers to tell us when and how to begin the count. It's my opinion that the reason that they like to begin the count on the high Sabbath after Passover is because if they do it that way, then it hides the fact that there was a Yom HaBikurim that would occur 3 days later, and it would support the resurrection of the King of creation. Most people don't realize, and I'm just going to challenge you, how many of you know that there are 2 Omer counts? Yom HaBikurim is an Omer count. At the end of Yom Kippurim, we're to bring a sheaf of barley. The high priest is supposedly in seclusion for 3 days from the end of the 14th. He goes into seclusion with a sheaf of barley that has a scarlet thread around it. And for 3 days, he's in seclusion. He comes out on the end of that third day, and he exposes that to all of the people that were around him, and he says, "Is this in fact the sheaf?" And they acknowledge that, yes, that is him. How? Because we see him, and we're going to touch him. If I can't see that, say that 5 times. If I can't see that barley sheaf and see the fact that that barley sheaf has been cut off and has a scarlet thread around it, I won't believe that that's the real first fruits offering. Surely that's not set a light off. The second counting involves the count from now to Shavuot, and it's a wheat harvest. The word for barley is the word seorah, and it represents the baser man, his animalistic nature. But it's interesting because that same root for barley has the same root as the word for gate. At Passover, the gates are open and an opportunity presented at the gates. Why is it important to present it at the gate? Because that's the seat of judgment. An opportunity is presented at the seat of judgment at the gate, and it's about to determine your lawful right to exit Egypt. You need to learn what your rights are, not just to depend on somebody else to do it for you. You stand behind the platform and you dictate to a congregation, and the congregation takes your word for it. And most of the people behind the behind these sacred desks don't have enough information to stay saved themselves. It's a sad truth. It doesn't end there. If you miss the proper first count, did you hear what I just said? The first Yom HaBikurim, and then after Yom HaBikurim, you start your Omer. If you miss that, you will be missing and denying the resurrection of Yeshua. The second Omer count involves wheat. The word for wheat is chita. It's interesting because it has the same root as chata, which means sin. Shavuot is all about revealing and destroying the sin connection in you as an individual. But the interesting thing about it is from the time you begin the Omer count to Shavuot, this is revealing to you generational constraints, generational tears that may have gotten inside the sheath, and gives you an opportunity for 50 days as we're traversing in the living Word of Yahweh and our mind is being renewed. We're being mikvahd in His Word. It gives you 50 days to examine the generational constraints on your lifestyle and break those generational curses. The Omer count serves as a marker. As I said, it points back toward Yom HaBikurim, Passover, and forward to Shavuot. If you want some confirmations regarding the first fruits, all you have to do is go back and look, and you'll see Noah's Ark rested on Mount Ararat on the 17th of the 7th month. And if you go back and study, Exodus chapter 12 says that the months were changed. The 7th month became the first month and vice versa. And so Mount Ararat was seen, and the Noah's Ark rested on the 17th day of the month. Ararat means the curse is reversed. The curse is reversed at Yom HaBikurim. Israel crosses the Red Sea on the 17th of Nisan. Manna ceased on the 17th of Nisan as they crossed over Jordan. Haman dies on the 17th of Nisan after a 3-day fast by Esther on the 14th, 15th, and 16th. And so I suggested if there's the evidence of that rehearsal all the way back to the beginning of creation, then there should of necessity be a rehearsal of a counting from Yom HaBikurim to a Shavuot destiny in the front of us. And so the literal counting is important. And if you don't literally count, you won't really know when you've arrived at the 50 days. But it's not the Omer count is not what's being spotlighted. The Omer count is actually a tool or the spotlight. The 50-day count is actually a tool to help accentuate what you're counting up to, and what you're counting up to is your personal and your generational jubilee. I have here in my notes, I don't have time to go through all of it, but you go back and look and see what it says in the book of Jubilees regarding celebrating the holy convocation known as Shavuot. This is mind-staggering. And I'm sharing this with you so that you'll understand I'm not trying to make light of Passover, first fruits, and unleavened bread, but I'm telling you there is without doubt ample proof that Shavuot is regarded in an extraordinary fashion above that of the other festivals, and I want to show you why. Would you like to know? It has to do with milk and honey. Did you know that one of the traditions of Shavuot and its celebration involves milk and honey? And while I was looking at that, I thought, that's interesting because Yahweh promises Israel an inheritance that included a land flowing with milk and honey. And at the same time, you find, and it's just twisted a little bit different, in the Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, where the Torah, and I refer to the Torah here as the words of the bride, is kind of obverse. Instead of milk and honey, the Torah, the words of the bride are described as honey and milk. And the reason I'm describing it as the words of the bride is because the Torah belongs to the bride. The Torah is a lawful, binding covenant document that was issued by the groom And either the groom or his agent has to be physically present, touchable, and tangible so that the bride can have visible proof that this is indeed the husband and or his agent. And that then is transferred to her, and it's her document. And it's not an accident. You need to think about this, that it was only, this is what blew my mind. It's only 11 days from Egypt to the Promised Land. It's my opinion that the first Shavuot should have been celebrated in the Promised Land, because that's the end goal of Yovel, the Shavuot. The end goal of my Jubilee is to have access to my inheritance. Let me show you a link between the Torah and the Promised Land. Both the Torah and the Promised Land were part of the inheritance of the nation or kingdom of priests, Torah and Eretz. The land, they are inseparable. Look at the numeric value of the word Torah, 611. The numeric value of the word Eretz, 291. If you subtract one from the other, you have 320, which is the value of the word Omri, my sheaf. Oh, that's strictly an accident. Yeah. No. Is it possible that the Torah or the wedding ketubah is actually detailing the entirety of the bridal price? The bridal price, part of which was the inheritance of the land. And listen to me, Shavuot, which is what the counting of the Omer is pointing you towards, Shavuot restores the bride's standing and renews that very covenant with her. That's amazing. If you look simply at the definitions without investigating down into the Hebrew text, you will miss what's being talked about here. This 50-day season is afforded Israel in advance of the original Mount Sinai encounter, but it's to remind them that creation's words, creation's letters, which have been inscribed in the heavens, would once again be reconfirmed at Mount Sinai, and it would expose to them an eternal promise that would ensure that not only they, but none of their generations would ever be enslaved again. You know the story. It didn't happen. But I'm telling you, you are the recipient of that eternal promise, and you are the seed of Abraham, and Yahweh has determined that you should be set free, and as you're being set free, you should never be enslaved again, never be in bondage again. Now, if we looked earlier, we looked at the counting of the Sephirot, and the first time we saw it used in Genesis chapter 15, verse 5, regarding Abraham's seed. I want to show you this. I want to show you what Isaiah 43:26 says about you being part of the ancestral lineage. Your family tree could be traced all the way back to Abraham and further. I want to show you what he says. Isaiah 43:26. Put me in remembrance, let us plead together, declare thou that thou mayest be justified. The word remembrance here is the Hebrew word zakar. It means to literally remind me. But it also indicates to remind me by pointing back to a marked man so that I can recognize him. Plead. It's the word shafat. And that word means to litigate. In other words, you come into my courtroom, you better be prepared to litigate your cause in a lawful manner. The word declare, this is the word we've been looking at all this time, shafar, to number, to count, to make a record of. And then finally the word justified. It's the word zadik, which means to be put in the right. You could say it this way, to be made whole. If you go into a courtroom and your case is brought before a judge and you are adjudicated as the one who won that case, the judge just made you whole. Literally what's being told you here is that you, during this 50-day season, It's given you an opportunity to put Yahweh in remembrance of His Word. What Word? Not only what's written in the Torah, but what's been recorded from eternity past in the stellar luminaries. You're being told to take account of who you are in relation to, or in relation to the marked man, in order to be put in the right and restored to your lawful place. Well, what is my lawful place? My lawful place is to be recorded in the genealogical lineage of the righteous King who has betrothed himself to us. He covenanted, he oathed, he severed himself. And this is our season of restoration, and it occurs at Shavuot while the Omer count gives us a period of reflection and self-examination. My goodness. Did you know that this Omer that we're being told to gather, that a sheaf, think about this, a sheaf is more than just me. I guess if it was singular, it'd be chef. You see the point I'm getting at? A sheaf is speaking generational. It's speaking of me gathering others with me. Did you know that at Passover, the only one that I can speak for and redeem is myself? I'm the only one that I can cover underneath the blood at Passover, but from Passover to Shavuot, I'm getting the restraints of generational curses broke off, and I can begin to stand in the place or the stead of my children, my children's children, and I can also turn around like Hezekiah did and intercede on behalf of previous generations and see my family lineage restored. That's a stark contrast to the slavery mentality that we've been taught to have. Don't rock the boat. Don't cause trouble. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Keep shut. Don't do anything to cause problems. Don't make the devil mad. I'm telling you, if you don't make the devil mad, you ain't saved. Did you know that the word Shavuot, go back and look at it. We've already looked at it for more than an hour in this particular teaching, and we understand that it means weeks. But when you understand it's connected to the word 7, that Shavuot also could be oaths. It's the season of oaths, the season of covenant cutting. Wow. I want to show you the message in the heavens. Shavuot occurs during the constellational sign known as Gemini. Gemini is a word that means literally twins. In Hebrew, it's the word teomim. This sign and its festival season contains a powerful message regarding a specific 50-day season, and that season has to be set aside to ensure that you pay attention to celebrating this moed. Now, I want to share something with you regarding this word for Gemini, or twins, teomim. Because when you see the constellational sign of Gemini in the heavens, it's always depicted as twins. But it was never, the oldest recorded example is at the planisphere of Dendera, and it actually indicates the husband and his wife, like I shared with in Genesis chapter 2. Teomim, even though it means twins, on a deeper level, it hints at oneness. In other words, different beings, physically separated yet conjoined in a unique spiritual union where they literally resemble one another to the point that they become identical. That was the pattern all the way back in Genesis chapter 2, where Adam and Isha become one, they become Echad, they become Teumim, they become twins. And I want to show you something else regarding this Tav Mem root. You saw it when we looked at the word for complete, Tamim, 7 Tamim Sabbaths. You see it here in this word Teomim as well. But how many of you ever remember the words Urim and Thummim, lights and perfections? I submit to you that if Yeshua was the lights, like the sun was the original light, then he of necessity would have had to have had a twin, a Teomim, a twin reflection, a Thummim Teomim, a perfected twin. A bride who would embody the very same DNA that he had and with whom he would one day be united and made basar echad, one flesh. I'll show you this. Go back and look in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, and you see the creation of the sun and his twin, the moon. Now, I want you also here to look at the word, the word in Hebrew, basar echad, and it has a numeric value of 515. That's interesting, because 515 is a numeric value of a word that means possession, inheritance. Yeshar, which means uprightness. That's the root of the word Yisrael, Israel. And so Yahweh Yeshua is a possession or inheritance of the bride herself. And it's not an accident that the Hebrew word for moon also has that same two-letter root stem. And if you look at the two-letter root stem, Yarech or Yarech, it has a numeric value of 218, and it's the same as the word that was given to Eve when it said, in sorrow, talking about her birth, that her sorrows would be multiplied. Remember that? That word is itzabon. Out of her sorrow and her pain comes a redemption provided by the Etz Tree Ban sun, the picture of the sun on the tree. Shavuot pictures the restoration of that. Skip the next slide. One of the unique places where the Omer count is seen, and very few people realize it, is in John chapter 20, verse 26, where after Passover and then the following festival of Yom HaBikurim, the resurrection, 8 days into the Omer count, 8, by the way, the number of new beginning, there's a meeting that occurs with Yeshua's disciples, and he makes himself visible to them, remember? But it's interesting that there is one disciple who is noticeably absent in that first meeting. Then there's another meeting shortly after that. And it's interesting because this disciple is literally the one who comes at the last. That should get you excited because you're the one who's coming at the last. This disciple is named. He's given a name in Hebrew, he's given a name in English, and he's given a name in Greek. He's called Thomas. The word Thomas is from the Hebrew word twins, teomim or team. The word Didymus is the Greek rendering of twins. And so Thomas is literally called twin. What you're finding happening here in this upper room encounter is a prophetic message regarding the sign of the twins. And the sign of the twins is Teomim, Thomas, or Didymus. And he is being revealed because he's pointing towards Shavuot. We're already past the 8 days now. It's actually 11 days into the Omer count. But the prophetic message regarding the fact that Thomas is noticeably absent and then finally present, that prophetic message has been distorted, and everybody refers to Thomas as doubting Thomas. And I'm going to prove to you, I'm going to prove as best I can that Thomas was not a doubter. The message behind what you find written about Thomas is that he was unwilling to swear loyalty to anyone who proclaimed to be a Messiah, husband to Israel, just like when the high priest comes out of that cave of seclusion and the high priest brings that sheaf before all of the people. I want you to identify this sheaf. Who is this sheaf? That sheaf is the first fruit of the resurrection. When he appears first, Thomas isn't there. Thomas is the one who's coming at the end. He's representing you. And Thomas is not doubting, I don't believe your word. Thomas is saying, no, unless I see the sheaf with the scarlet cord around it, I'm not going to take the word of anybody else, only the word of the one who is resurrected and can prove to me that he is my king, my husband, my Savior. He's waiting for proof that only the true Lord and Master could provide. Thomas is a picture of a faithful bride who will never, ever give herself to another who cannot prove that he is the resurrected Son of the living Elohim. And I'm telling you, there is a group in this last day that's going to be a counterfeit, because twins and counterfeit are closely related. Are you listening to me? And there is a counterfeit to the twin that's coming. And this counterfeit to the twin that's coming is going to take the word of another who's going to say, yes, I am the resurrected one. I'd had a wound to my head, but now I'm alive again. And they're going to follow him to their utter destruction. Shavuot is a season where proof is provided in the presence of the living Word made flesh, the one who is handled, the one whose promise can only be confirmed in the writing that would form a ketubah. And this is obviously what Thomas is looking for when he made the statement previously, unless I can see the print of the nails in his hands and touch him. And we think, oh, that's because he doubted. No, go back and look at the language. The word for hands here is a Hebrew word that indicates by agency of or by means of. The word print there is a Greek word that means a manner of writing the contents of a letter, something that had been cast, die, or stamped, a resemblance, a model, or a figure. And then the word for nail here is translated as nail, but it's also closely related to the word that means a ray of the sun, as in a shaft or a stylus, an instrument for writing like light. Is it possible that the language here is hiding the fact that the Teomim, the twin Thomas, is a figure of the bride, and all he's looking for is a lawful, printed, written, binding document, a ketubah, modeled after the original Sinai ketubah, the Torah, and what had been reflected in the stellar luminary scroll that is depicted during the constellational sign of Teomim, that could only reveal Yeshua as the bridegroom. And by the way, this is the same ketubah. How many of you remember when Moshe is put into the cleft of the rock? And Yahweh speaks to Moshe and says, listen, no man can see my face and live. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover your face with my hand, and I'm going to allow you to see my hinder parts. If you understand what Moshe saw the extended arms and back of the Messiah as he walked away. And he saw the stripes across the Messiah's back. And I'm convinced that every time he was flayed with a cat o' nine tails, that you could see in relief on his back the Hebrew language or the text of a Torah scroll that was living, walking in front of him. That's the same ketubah that Thomas said, I have to see. Thomas said, I need to see those same wounds in order to have the confirmation that he is the husband that I have been betrothed to, because I will not give my heart to another. I'll give you some other information. There is a book called The Gospel of Thomas. And it's interesting because how many of you remember the parable of the 90 and 9? All of the other synoptic gospels treat this parable of the 99, and it says that there were 100 sheep, and one of those 100 sheep goes astray. And the shepherd left the 99, and he goes after the one. And it's always been taught about the benevolence and the kindness and the mercy of the shepherd, because he wanted to go back to that one who had strayed, and he's going to bring that sinner back into the fold. But that's not what Thomas talks about. Thomas refers to that one that is lost as the lost sheep of the house of Israel, that the shepherd is intentionally seeking after, which is by its very nature declaring the same thing that Yeshua himself said, I have come not but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I set the 99 aside. There's one that's gone astray. That's the one that's coming. She's the one that's coming at the last. No other gospel writer says the same thing Thomas is the only one that had the knowledge of what was going on here, or at least confirms it in this writing. And this is a direct fulfillment of what you see written in Ezekiel 34, verse 16. Let me share this with you. At Shavuot, the groom or his agent, the ruach here, must be present, and able to be touched, which is exactly what Yeshua provides. The Omer count punctuates the season between the resurrection and Shavuot and affords the faithful an opportunity for a status change. You can change your sheaf. Yeah. You can change. You see, most of us have been traveling around with a lot of tears. In fact, by times we've been tears ourselves. And so Yahweh is allowing us, see, when you get saved, you can't do anything else about the other tears. This is the only one I can deal with. This is the only one I can't change. No one else. This is the only one I can change. But from Passover to Shavuot, there's an opportunity here for me to have the spotlight of His Word shined on my life so that I can go back all generationally and find out who sold my inheritance. Which one of my family members sold my inheritance, sold our possession, sold our name, sold our name? Which one of my ancestors brought this bondage on us and let me stand in their stead and make the declaration that I have been set free, and I intercede on their behalf, and I'm redeeming the family name? That's what it's talking about. This is the season for you to prepare to touch Yeshua. You can't remain in an impure, leprous condition where the words of our mouth reveal Lashon Hara in our hearts. We have got to manifest the marked man, putting Yahweh in remembrance in order to be numbered Sephirot at the day of betrothal known as Shavuot. John, in the gospel there, tells us the above incident occurred on the 8th day of the Omer count. In Yeshua's day, like the current season we're in right now, 8 days would have been after the 3 previous days for Yom HaBikurim, making it the 11th day. The promised land was an 11-day journey. Shavuot is a mirror of the count toward a Yovel. Let me ask you something. Can you feel it? Some of you have been looking for it for a long time. This Shavuot is going to be different. Rochelle, we're going to celebrate this in the land flowing with milk and honey. This Shavuot is going to be different. How many of you remember in the garden when Mary approaches who she thought was gardener? He said, "Don't touch me, I'm not yet ascended unto my Father." Listen, this is part and parcel of the very same thing that happens at Mount Sinai. She couldn't touch him until a Yovel takes place. Look at the word for trumpet, Yovel. It means to bring or to carry something forth, specifically to carry it from out of the grave. And I am fully convinced that Thomas was aware of this ancient text, and he was expecting, because he had been mikvahd, he was expecting to touch the mountain, Yeshua's flesh, on that exact day, which was prefigured by the execution of our Messiah. And so this makes the summation or the counting of an Omer a practical rehearsal of both the Shemitah and Yovel cycles, each of which points to a season of release and restoration and the end of a cycle of bondage and a resurrection out of dead things. While the rabbis focus on Shavuot as the giving of the Torah, and it was, but they fail to understand that it was a rehearsal of that Torah who would be made flesh and who could be handled by only one individual. They think that they could handle him. The only one that could handle the living word is his twin, his Teomim. And I wanted to finish with what Revelation says, the Spirit and the bride say, "Come." And many of you are tuning in. There's stuff going on in your life, and you've been struggling. Some of you have been going through some really difficult times, whether it's physically with your health. Shavuot is a season of freedom and release. And only you can answer, what is it that's kept you bound? What are you struggling with? Is it your finances? Is it your health? Is it your relationships? This is the season for you to Sephirot, to count, to declare your Omer, your standing, and to walk in the freedom of a living man. Passover broke your personal curses. This season is about a generation release and your restoration. If you have something going on in your life, right now while I'm talking, there's some of you listening via the internet. You feel the Holy Spirit tugging and speaking to you about something in your life. It may be that it's because something was generationally passed down to you, and it's been gathered into your sheath. You can break that off of you if you want to. This is a season of breakthrough. I pray that you've heard this word this afternoon and you understand that this is a sent word for you. This is a word for you. This is all about your release. You can look at me and think about, well, it's his one. No, this is about the one that you look at in the mirror if you want to be set free. I want to be set free, but I also want to see all of those with me. I want to bring a sheaf with me that will not have spot or wrinkle in it as well. Amen. Thank you so much.
Oh, we can do a lot better than that. What a powerful, life-changing word. I don't know about you guys in here, you that are watching online. This was a very, very powerful, man, what a paradigm shift with Thomas. Man. If you're watching online, like you heard Pastor Dave say, you know, there's a lot of people going through a lot of things. And like the Messiah, when he turned his back, we all saw those stripes. This might be for someone out there, maybe someone in here, I don't know. Is on the back of the Messiah is like the back of a book. One of the final things that you write in the back of the book is the end of the story. If I could say this without offending anybody, on the back of Messiah, in the midst of those stripes, was the promise of our healing. Did you hear what I said? It was the promise that we have been healed from the touch of the enemy. Thank you, Yeshua. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for forgiving us. Thank you for delivering us. Thank you for giving us another opportunity. There might be someone out there right now. That's all you need to hear is, I just need one more chance. Passover is the only Moedim that reveals a second chance to prepare us for Shavuot. If you're watching online right now, I just want to pray. If you're in here, come up here. If you're online, stand up from where you are. Sometimes we don't do this, but I think it's good to do it today. That old basic resentment for the sinner, for the backslider, for that one out there. If it's just one, this message right here was that lifeline for you. This was a lifeline. This teaching was a lifeline. How many people believe that? This was a lifeline. This Omer count, this word that has gone forth, that let me know something, that I have another chance, that you have another chance. We all have another opportunity, another chance to make it right before the coming of our King. Look to your neighbor and say, I've been forgiven. This is an invitation for maybe someone online. You might need to hear that. You have been forgiven. You have been counted. The Omer count is letting us know that you count. Your life counts. Your life is precious. Your life means something. And I truly believe that this was probably the most prophetic invitation for today. So if you're in here today and you want to come up in this area for a moment online, you just want to lift your hands up, let Abba just touch your life. We're not going to go around and laying hands on everybody. No, the King is present. His presence is here. And we're giving you an invitation watching online. If this is the first time you ever heard anything like this, and it just impacted you, and you don't know what to do, guess what? Like one of the songs we heard earlier is looking up. Father, Abba, here we are. All of us. Here we are. We lay ourselves down before you. There's someone watching that your life is all messed up. Seems like nothing's working out for you. Nothing. But today's your breakthrough. Today's the day of breakthrough. Today is the day of breakthrough. Today is the day where the tares are being released. Today is the day where the shackles are being released. Today is the day where any form of bondage that would hinder you from meeting your King has been severed. Abba, forgive us. Let's all say that together. Abba, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive everyone around us of their trespasses, because ours are bigger than theirs. Ours are worse than theirs. Abba, be merciful to us as we come before you and just do the surgical work in our hearts and remove all the dark stuff out of the hearts of your people, out of the minds, the plans for evil. Remove them. For you said in your word that you know the plans within the heart of a man, but your purposes will prevail in the lives of those who come to you. Father, cut away everything. Circumcise our hearts and our minds, and let it be a complete circumcision in the hearts of those that are listening today. Our King is coming. We keep hearing this. We've been hearing it for a long time. But the King of Israel is coming soon. And he's coming for that bride without a spot or a wrinkle. You can pray in your own words, you guys. What a word. I knew this was going to be a powerful word. I read them notes last night, and it brought me to tears. So much came to me. I said, my gosh. Thomas had a bad rap. He was falsely accused of being a doubter when all he was someone that just wanted to look like Yeshua. People might have mislabeled you, doubted you, and in the midst of all that was coming out, it might not have come out the right way. You just want to look like your King. You just want to be a mirror image of your Savior in all reality. Your spirit man is crying out. I believe that this is the day that this happens. Lift your hands up. Lift your hands up and let Abba touch your hands. Let him touch your life. Father, move in the midst by way of your spirit in the homes of everyone watching, in every home that is here. Father, Abba, we come before you. I thank you for your servant, a shepherd amongst many that is true and faithful to the call, Pastor David Mathews and his wife, Brenda Mathews. We thank you for your bracha upon them to keep delivering such powerful truths that change our lives. We thank you, Abba, for this Omer count. Release, 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 release. Release, 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 release. Release, 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 release. Release. Now you have to grab that. Grab this scroll that came down from heaven today on the Counting of the Omer. Eat that scroll. Did you hear what I said? Eat the scroll, the whole thing. Eat the whole thing. It's just like those bitter seeds. The more bitter a seed is, the more powerful it is against cancer and kills it. The word of the Most High is bitter to the flesh and wants to kill everything that is in the way, so that who you really are, who I really am, who we really are in Messiah can be seen, Thomas. Right? What a revelation. And isn't it interesting? I believe it's only Thomas, out of all the disciples and everyone, that Yeshua said, come and touch me. He's saying that to you today. You thought you were a doubting Thomas. You were just an asking Thomas. That's what you were. You were just asking. I want to see the real thing. I'm tired of church. That's what Thomas was saying, right? I'm tired of these sugar-coated messages. I'm tired of the leaders just, seems like everything's happening for them, but our lives are destroyed. It seems like it's chaos as soon as we leave the building. Not anymore. There's no doubting Thomases in the kingdom. Thomas looks like Yeshua. You look like Yeshua. You're a reflection of the King. You're not what the world labels you. You're not what maybe your father and mother labeled you. Oh, you'll be nothing. You're no good for nothing, whatever, or whoever. No, that's doubting Thomas. Thomas just wants to look like Yeshua. That's it. That's what a sinner is they just want to get out of that when they come. They don't want to be the same, right? We want to see the holes in his hands, because there's a whole lot there he's trying to show us. There's a hole in his side. Why? He says, I want you close to me. I don't want you distant anymore. I want you close, right? There's a crown on his head of thorns so that you can have a crown of gold. He took all the filth, all the darkness, all the pain, all the suffering, all the sickness in our place. Thank you, Yeshua, for stepping in where I deserve to be sent to hell. Right? Thank you, Abba. Thank you, Father. Let's give him a big hand clap for who he is.